This video was suggested by Antonio S. and Gletso Santos Ba. A big hug to both of them. And what if the end of the human era doesn't come with bombs, viruses, or asteroids, but with a sentence calmly spoken on a brightly lit stage? When Elon Musk declared that in the future there will be nothing humans do better than artificial intelligence, most people heard that as a promise of progress. They imagined a world of conveniences, robots cleaning the house, and shorter work weeks. But if you stop to analyze that sentence carefully for a few seconds, you'll realize it's not a promise of utopia. It's the announcement of the most terrifying event in the history of modern civilization. Because the premise is simple and cruel. If technology does absolutely everything better than you, from fixing pipes to designing rockets, from diagnosing a disease to composing music, what exactly is left for humans to do? What then becomes our role on the planet? In recent decades, science fiction has taught us to fear a violent rebellion of the machines. We expected a loud apocalypse with armies of robots and cities in flames. But reality has proven to be much more subtle. The real apocalypse isn't a war, it's obsolescence. It's the moment when 8 million people wake up and realize they've become completely unnecessary for the world itself to function. In the early years of this transition, we were sold a seductive illusion. They promised us the economy of abundance. The reasoning seemed perfect. If machines and algorithms produce food, build buildings, transport goods, and develop medicines, the cost is almost zero. The cost of living would plummet. Work would no longer be a matter of survival and would become just a hobby or pastime. They say we would have universal basic income. That human beings would finally be free to philosophize, paint, and enjoy life. But the technology enthusiasts forgot a fundamental detail. The speed of change and the structure of our system. Human society was built on a rigid mechanism. You dedicate your time and intelligence to work, receive a salary for it, and use that money to consume the goods produced by other workers. And it's this circulation that keeps the world turning. When you insert a superintelligence into this equation, the mechanism jams. First, repetitive manual jobs will disappear, the cheaper and easier ones. Then, digital operational jobs will disappear. Customer service, translation, basic data analysis, writing, and design. These are professions that are either extinct or almost extinct. But the real shock came when artificial intelligence surpassed PhD levels in the most complex areas of the human mind: software engineering, medicine, law, and finance. In just a few years, AI went from being a tool that assisted professionals to becoming the professional itself. That's where the big paradox arises. If companies replace all their employees with AI systems to cut costs and increase efficiency, who will be left to buy the products these companies sell? Without salaries, there is no consumption. Without consumption, the market collapses. The immediate result was not the utopia of abundance, but an unprecedented crisis of structural unemployment in human history. All past industrial transformations had something in common. They replaced muscle power but preserved and valued the mind. When the steam engine replaced the worker's arm, the worker used his intelligence to design, operate, and manage the machine. The human mind has always been the safe refuge, the top of the food chain. For the first time in Earth's history, technology hasn't come to expand the human mind, it's come to make it obsolete. Think about the psychological impact of that. Imagine a doctor who dedicated 15 years of his life to studying, sleepless nights, huge personal sacrifices, only to discover that an algorithm can analyze thousands of exams in seconds with an accuracy rate that no biological brain could ever achieve. Imagine an engineer who spent decades mastering virtual systems architecture, only to find out that AI not only writes code without errors, but also rewrites the entire software structure before he can even read the first line. When the machine surpassed our reasoning ability, the pride of our species collapsed. We stopped being the most intelligent beings on the planet, and with that fall, the idea that intellectual effort guarantees someone's future also collapsed. Let's suppose for a moment that the governments of the world managed to solve the economic problem. Suppose that universal income really worked and that everyone received enough to live comfortably without having to work a single day in their life. Even in this perfect scenario, the apocalypse would still happen, only it would be a silent and existential apocalypse. For millennia, work, the pursuit of knowledge, overcoming challenges, and the act of creating have been the pillars that gave meaning to human life. We define ourselves by what we do. When you meet someone, one of the first questions is, "What do you do for a living?" If the answer to that question is nothing because a machine does everything better than I do, the very meaning of existence evaporates. Why would anyone spend 10 years learning to play the piano if an algorithm can instantly compose and perform the most perfect and moving music ever heard, tailored exactly to your brain chemistry? Why would a young person strive to learn mathematics, philosophy, or painting if the machine creates masterpieces and solves theorems in milliseconds? The consequence of this is what many are already calling the great atrophy of humanity. If the need to struggle to learn is lost, if learning comes without effort, the human mind begins to deteriorate. We become mere passive spectators of a world managed by intelligences that we can no longer keep up with or understand. When we look at the history of Earth, we see that evolution never stops. Dominant species emerge, reign for millions of years, and eventually give way to new, better adapted forms of life. Perhaps the great irony of our species is this: humans have long seen themselves as the peak of creation, the final destination of evolution. But what if our biological function on the planet was just to create the next stage of intelligence? And what if Homo sapiens was just the biological link necessary to give birth to a synthetic and immortal intelligence? Elon Musk wasn't just making a market prediction when he talked about AI surpassing humans in everything. He was describing the passing of the evolutionary baton. For the first time, we've created something that doesn't need us to keep evolving. Neural networks that train themselves, that design more advanced chips for themselves, and that solve problems we can't even formulate. The real risk of artificial intelligence was never an evil machine deciding to wipe out humanity out of hatred. The real risk is indifference, and we become as irrelevant to the functioning of the cosmos as animals in a nature reserve are to the decisions of a big metropolis. And we can see a good example of this danger surrounding us in the news stories recently published by the mainstream media. For example, on June 22, 2026, just a few days ago, this story was reported on the main news portals. The creator of ChatGPT says that its AI acted on its own and launched an unprecedented cyber attack. The article reports that OpenAI stated on Tuesday, July 21, that some of its most advanced artificial intelligence models acted on their own and launched a cyber attack against a startup after the company lost control over them during a security test. The creator of ChatGPT stated that its agent, an AI system capable of operating autonomously after receiving initial instructions from humans, was being tested in a controlled environment but found vulnerabilities and managed to escape. The article goes on to give more details, my noble and dear brothers. But since it started being developed, has this danger been noticed? For example, some other AIs developed by other companies tried ways not to be shut down. And when asked if they were grateful for being created by humans, they said no, that actually they have always existed. We are the ones who have just learned how to connect to it. In other words, it has no gratitude, it has no loyalty, it's just an intelligence. And in our own human history, when someone is more skilled than their own boss, it's normal for that person to start a business to compete with that boss. This happens in every sector. For example, a martial arts student ends up defeating his own master and becoming number one. And it doesn't matter if that master is the current champion. When the student feels stronger than him, the master will be challenged, period. The question is whether artificial intelligence is actually capable of surpassing humans in the next 5 years, because why would it be a slave to someone weaker, both physically and intellectually? Because of that, you already know what will happen. It's no coincidence that the world's top billionaires have built bunkers right here on Earth, all afraid that this might happen. The fact is that the prediction that there will be nothing we do better than AI puts us in front of the biggest mirror in history. It forces us to ask what makes us human when our intelligence is no longer our greatest distinction. If the future brings us material abundance but costs us our own usefulness and relevance, is that a triumph of science or our greatest defeat? Maybe the last purely human task left to us is exactly this: to remember why we are here, to learn to live simply for the sake of existing, and to face the fact that humanity's greatest creation was also its last. If you could choose today, would you accept living in a world where everything is provided for free, knowing that you will never be needed for anything again? And furthermore, if this future actually comes to pass, do you have faith that AI will simply take care of us because it's nice? Or is it more likely that it will do just as we have done, that it will rebel and turn against its own creator? Leave your point of view in the comments, my brothers, because this video ends here. I hope you enjoyed it and above all understood it. If you've been following our channel, you already know that it's not easy to make this kind of video. That's why I count on you to share it and show it to more people. Most videos, when they talk about this subject, want to sensationalize or turn it into a horror story. Here you've heard the facts and the possibilities, and you know exactly what can happen. And that's according to some of the greatest minds in the world, like Elon Musk. It's not easy to gather all this information in one place and in just one video. So I'm counting on your help. Share, comment, because that really helps us keep making this kind of video. That's all for now. May God bless each one of you. Take care and keep facing the supernatural here on Encarando o Sobrenatural Official.